to Breaking the Grade. Hello, educators. Welcome to Breaking the Grade. We're going to be with educator and education breaker, Alexa Escobedo. Alexa taught for 10 years before leaving the classroom to make an impact far beyond her class of 35. She now works in organization-level marketing roles to support equal treatment from large-scale platforms. So how has Alexa broken education norms? What concrete problems exist in our schools, equality practices, and how can we make an impact one classroom at a time? We'll ask these questions and more today, as well as hear concrete advice to go out and break the grade ourselves. Your grade-breaking entrepreneurial journey will benefit from our conversation with A+ Alexa. Alexa, how do you like that introduction? I called you A+ Alexa.
I love it. I think that's going to be my new tagline. Thank you for that.
When I wrote that, I was like, this is great. And I don't really have a nickname for you, John. Sorry.
No nickname. I've been looking forward to this this session with Alexa. So that's all we need is that awesome introduction.
Cool. Yeah. John Gamba is my co-host. He's a friend. He's a mentor. He's got great hair. He's a brilliant guy. So what more can you ask for from somebody? You know,
that's all you need.
That's all you need. Alexa, your journey has gotten you here today, and it's been an interesting one, probably to say the least. And we want to hear about it, literally up to the moment when I met you 2 weeks ago, and your journey was one thing, and it changed, which is fantastic. So bring us up to date, but start us, you know, kind of when the teaching began, please.
Just take you back. Okay. Yeah. Well, all right, we're going to go back all the way to when I was in second grade, I would say, because my mom was a teacher. My dad was a teacher for a hot second. My brother even went into teaching for a little bit. And so teaching was just, it was destiny for me. And I really didn't see myself ever doing anything else. So to be sitting here in front of you as a marketing and sales specialist is quite a change from the journey that I ever thought for myself. But I could not be more excited for where I've ended up so far. And yeah, so I would work in my mom's classroom during my recesses and lunches. I was hardcore. I was all about it. And I still am. I love education and I love teaching. So I went to school and I went to Fordham University for my master's and got my teaching certification there as well. And then I moved back to Southern California, which is where I'm from. And I started teaching at a local private Catholic school. And this was back in 2011 when not very many teaching jobs were open. And I had always seen myself in the public sector, but you kind of had to go where the job was. And it was really very serendipitous. It was the church that I grew up in. I received all my sacraments and it was a school that I knew well. So it was pretty cool to teach there for a little bit. My mom even taught there before she was pregnant with me. So very intertwined again. And I taught there for 5 years and it was an incredible beginning experience into the education world. But, you know, private schools, especially parochial schools, you don't have nearly as much funding as public schools. And you might think otherwise because it is tuition based and all of that, but you don't have as many of the resources that a public school has. And so I kept feeling a little bit like a big fish in a small pond. And so I was looking to see, okay, am I done with teaching? Am I trying to look for something else? Am I ready for something else? Or is it just that I need a different environment? And so that's when I applied for public schools and I taught there for 5 years. It definitely helped me kind of satiate that craving of something more because it definitely was a much bigger pond and it's a huge district. So there was a lot of room to play with different, you know, committees and opportunities within the district to test out and see what I was interested in beyond just the classroom. And that's where I got to play a little bit with, you know, doing trainings and being a district liaison and seeing the inner workings of the admin side of it. And as fascinating as all of that was, I was still having that itch of, I feel like there's more I can do. And I think we can all agree, and I'm sure in all the educators that you've talked to, we know that the pandemic definitely spotlighted the massive inequities that are in our school system. And we knew they existed before, but this just blew it all wide open. And being a teacher during that time, one, I was 32 weeks pregnant with my second child when we got the news on March 13th that we were not returning to school for, at the time, it was only 2 weeks. And I had a 3-year-old suddenly at home with me, and I was trying to teach online, and it was complete insanity when everyone had no idea what was going on. And I just started feeling a little bit like, okay, I'm feeling a little burnt out here. And, you know, those first 2 months, teachers were the saints and everyone loved us. And it was, oh my gosh, we had no idea how much teachers do. And that turned very sour very quickly. You know, by July, it was like, well, why don't they want to be back in the classroom? Why? They're just getting paid to stay home. And that was far from the truth of what was actually happening. We were working 24/7. There was no longer a break from home and work. And on top of the mental load of our own families, you are constantly thinking about your own students and worrying about them and their family situations. And I feel so blessed that I was able to be with my students during that time. And the class that I had, I will never forget, for very obvious reasons, but also just you bond through that kind of trauma, right? And then the next school year started. Our district decided to start online for the first month and a half. And then there were talks about going hybrid. And I was one of the few that was very vocal on our staff about not wanting to start back yet because there was so much unknown. And we kind of gave into that parent pressure. And I think we rushed going back, if I'm being completely honest. That could get me in trouble, but it's the truth. There wasn't a whole lot of forethought in how it was actually going to roll out and what the safety measures were. And I had a 4-month-old at home and a 3-year-old. And all of a sudden, it became very much, I need to protect my kids and I need to make sure that I'm safe for them. And again, there was a lot of disagreement between myself and the choices that were being made because teaching is such a selfless job. And I think that has gotten capitalized a little too far. And I think during this time, that's what you're seeing. You're seeing teachers finally realize, I love my students and I would do anything for them, but my students can't come before myself and my family. And there became this really difficult decision of, sadly, who's more important? And it has to be your own family and your own kids in that moment. And as the year was going on, decisions kept getting made where it was like, I just don't feel like our safety is being considered. And it's more about, we need to get the economy back. We need to get kids back in school so parents can go back to work. And I completely understand that. You know, I feel that for any parent that was home with their kids trying to work, it was impossible. I was trying to do it too. And as the school year kept going, and we also had so much going on in current events. You know, we had the election, we had inauguration, we had January 6th, all of these things going on. And I taught 5th grade. And my students, I can tell you right now, they are not babies. They are not ones that I'm trying to make them more mature than they are, but they're seeing things. They're on YouTube, they're on TikTok, and they have questions and they don't understand what they're seeing. And if no one's talking to them to help them kind of place what's going on, you kind of just leave them in the lurch. And then there's just fear and misunderstanding of what's happening in the world. And I always viewed my class as a safe space. And I worked really hard every year with my students. We were family. And I told them, just like brothers and sisters can fight, you don't always have to get along with each other, but you do always need to respect each other. And so I created that safe space where difficult conversations could be had.
Yeah.
And I valued that in my classroom. And when students had questions about what was going on, I'm not one to shy away. And I'm certainly not one trying to impart my feelings on anything. But I think you should give students a safe space to be able to talk freely and share their emotions and concerns. And that was something that I did not feel was being appreciated or encouraged. I'll just say it that way towards the end of the year. And so really, when I look at my own journey and I see right now, March is kind of where I was a little bit on the coals of being raked across the coals a little bit with discussions I was having in my classroom, trying to be open with students about issues that were going on. And I just look at where I am now and that I'm about to go work for a school that, or not school, I'm sorry. I'm about to go work for a company that goes into schools and they literally, their base is about anti-racist policies. And it's about working with disenfranchised youth. And it's about having difficult conversations and embracing that and not shying away from what's hard. It's about embracing it and saying, you know what? These are necessary conversations. We need to look at our system as a whole. How are we not serving everyone? Because that's the truth. We're not. And again, I was in a place where those were conversations I wanted to have, but it was not something that I could be doing. And yeah, so I just look at my journey now and I'm thinking, wow, about March is when I started updating my resume and making a LinkedIn. I never even had a LinkedIn until then. And here I am now. I've worked at Institute for Education Innovation, which was an incredible organization working with superintendents and ed tech companies. And 8 months later, I am about to start my new journey with CT3 Education on Monday. So I haven't started yet, but I know they were a partner with IEI. And so I've seen firsthand the kind of work they do, the workshops they hold. And it's really, really incredible stuff. It's exactly why I left the classroom. And I'm just so excited.
An amazing journey. Thank you for sharing. Authentic, emotional. You know, I was just taken by your story and your journey. So thank you, Alexa. One quick question. You just talked a lot about the pandemic, and then you kind of wrapped it up toward the end with some of the other systemic issues that we're facing in the world. I'm curious, front lines in the classroom, do you think that it's like pandemic 80% and then everything else 20%? Or can you kind of quantify everything that you've been through over the last 2 years? Pandemic, systemic inequities. So George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor and these, and then you go to the insurrection, and then now you're into the politics of CRT, the politics of masking. Does it all kind of compound and synergize into this crisis, or is certain elements of it stronger than others in terms of the negatives?
That's a great question. And I would say, you know, for me personally, it started off with the pandemic, and it started off with decisions that were made around, you know, going too soon, not soon enough. Vaccines weren't ready yet. And it was just, here, go. And I felt very strongly against that. And of course, once you're in the classroom, seeing the kids, you get wrapped back into it, and it's wonderful to be with them, and you're excited to be back. But then you have this in the back of your mind, we're still dealing in the middle of this pandemic where some people just pretend that it's gone. And even talking about current events was suddenly not okay. And it's because it was so politically divided. And, you know, I wasn't trying at all to stand up there and say, well, this is how you should vote, or this is how you should be feeling. It was more, you know, I was one of the only teachers that actually talked about the election. That's how crazy it was. And people were too scared to even bring it up or touch on it. Yeah. And I thought, no, 5th grade, it's all about government, and you need to learn the process of government. And, you know, I did a good job when at the end of that lesson, the kids were like, so wait, who would you vote for? And of course I didn't answer, but that tells you I showed the candidates at an equal amount, you know, and I gave them the facts and the information. I kept my feelings out of it. And that's what a good educator does. And I think there's parents that don't believe that educators have that in their heart. And that's why we do what we do. No one's going into education thinking, how am I going to indoctrinate my class today? You know, it just boggles my mind when we're in this conversation about CRT and, you know, again, indoctrinating children with the LGBTQ plus information or curriculum. And it's just like, no, we're trying to teach about people
And developing critical thinking skills. It's not so much the answer, it's how you get to the answer by being able to think through it Socratively, if you will.
100%, 100%. And it's about, again, engaging in those difficult conversations, knowing how to navigate it in a kind, respectful manner, which is something we have lost. And if they don't get it in the school, in elementary and beyond, when are they going to learn that?
Alexa, we have a difficult conversation to have. Is John and I are sitting here with no sponsor. So this is the moment in the show. We're 15 minutes in, and so some sponsor is supposed to say something great. We don't have that. So it's a difficult part of the show for us. We're going to breeze right past it because we have some ideas and potential big sponsors coming, but here we are. Just wanted to let everybody know we're halfway through. And this is the part of the show where we begin to talk about, where you are now and how you are breaking for good in the education space. But I wanted to, John mentioned, I think this was before we came on, your LinkedIn, and congratulations on a new LinkedIn, but having an amazing LinkedIn. You wrote something that I encourage everybody to read. And this was kind of, it starts off, this encompasses how I felt as a teacher in the classroom last year. But I'm going to read this part here that says, we can't keep saying, do it for the kids, when our own mental, emotional, and physical health are paying the price. So you clearly are practicing what you were preaching and decided it was time for me to do something else. So can you talk about how you got to that point and what you're doing at CT3?
Sure. It really came down to in March, and going a little bit back to what John had asked about how much was it the pandemic versus other things. And it started off as the pandemic issues. And then as vaccines came out and it just felt more comfortable, it really became about CRT and what are they teaching my kids and that kind of conversation, where I used to do Kindness Wednesdays every week. And it was either kindness towards yourself, towards others, or towards the world. And I would do a lesson on implicit bias and trying to talk about how that's something we all have and how do we recognize it to do better. And I had a parent, actually, it was only one. I had more people compliment me on it than this, but I had one parent who was very upset that I would even introduce that idea to her 5th grader. And he had questions and she didn't know how to answer. And she didn't appreciate, she thought it wasn't my job to do that. And so more of those kinds of conversations kept happening. And I thought, I'm not even able to do the part of my job that I love the most, which is creating good citizens and just embracing, really, it's SEL type learning. I mean, you're talking social, emotional, how to navigate the world around you and interact with other people. And I can't even do that. And that was the point for me where it really caused that break for me, where I thought, I got into education to help children be better, be the best version of themselves. And I was just here as a conduit to kind of present the lessons. Like you had said, John, just help them through that critical thinking. How can you be the best version of yourself? And I was starting to feel bogged down by outside pressures of, okay, here's my little microcosm, my classroom, where my students felt so safe. We had so many incredible conversations where they opened up to topics that I didn't even touch on. They wanted to bring up about their own personal lives and things they were going through. And if anybody from the outside had come in during those, they would have said, you're not a therapist. You shouldn't be having these conversations with the kids. And it's like, but if they can't do it here where they feel safe with a safe, trusted adult, with their friends, then where are they supposed to do that? If they have a home life where maybe they don't have mom or dad around as much, maybe by no fault of mom and dad, like maybe they have to work to be able to provide for their families, or maybe it's not such a great situation, but if they feel safe in my classroom, that should be embraced. And it really made this break for me where I thought, I can't even do the part of my job that I love the most. And history was the other part of my job that I loved the most. I was a history major from UCSD, and go Tritons. I love history and I dig deep, and I would pull primary sources and other articles that talked about a certain piece of history, whether it was the Dred Scott case or 13 colonies being built. The fact that my students knew that the 13 colonies survived because of slavery would be seen as CRT now. And that is mind-boggling to me, that, you know, teaching truth of history is seen as a bad thing. And I knew I just wasn't a fit for a classroom at this point. I realized I needed to move to a place where I could have impact and work with teachers, but at a greater scale, and doing the work that I really loved and felt passionate about.
Before we get into CT3, John, you know, you spend a lot of time with Penn GSE and teachers, former teachers. I mean, is this what you're hearing?
Yeah, I mean, I'll flip it with a question to Alexa. Talk about breaking. Do you feel at the end of your tenure in the classroom that the students were broken? Because we hear this: learning loss, COVID slide, 2 years behind, not proficient in algebra by 9th grade. And I constantly hear the deficit lens, that everything's broken. But I also hear, and there's a lot of research that says that students developed resiliency skills. They developed an ability to adapt and persevere. Are our students broken, or is it complicated?
Before you start, for the people who are listening and not watching, as John said, deficit skills, Alexa's eyes rolled. And then as he continued to talk, there was a lot of nods, you know, so I want to paint the right picture here.
Yeah, learning loss is probably one of the most detrimental phrases we could be using in education. Mm-hmm. I think it not only puts the teachers down, who have worked their butts off the last 2 years and continue to do so, it also puts down the students who, as you said, they have learned so much more than any textbook could have taught them. And when I look at my students from this past year, because I guess I didn't mention this, but I left the classroom in June 2021. And I look at those students, and even though, yes, there are obviously areas where it's like, oh man, we got to get back to some socialization and learning how to problem solve and all of that. I look at what they've been able to accomplish as far as pivoting to any situation that was thrown at them, whether it was hybrid learning where they're in cohorts and only go to school half the day and then online the other half, being able to email and be coherent in asking their questions and being more vocal. There were so many other skills that were gained during this time that I think are so overlooked. And it's so dangerous that we do that, because it really creates this negative thought process for the kids, the parents, and the teachers, everyone involved. It's all of a sudden, oh my gosh, my kid's so far behind. Behind what?
Right.
Everyone shut down. There was no journey here that was already premeditated. Everyone was flying by the seat of their pants. And the fact that these kids showed up, the fact that they turned any type of work in, to be honest, at that point, if you turned something in, we were excited. And really the showing up piece was the biggest, but they showed up and they were so positive. You know, that first day back with hybrid, as much as I was anxious and very full of dread, thinking I am for sure going to get COVID and I'm going to bring it home to my newborn baby and my toddler, and what's going to happen then, right?
Right.
The moment I had those kids in the classroom, there was this sense of relief of they're okay. You know, they're here, they're smiling. They're just so happy to be here with me, with their friends. And of course, I was the mask police, and you better believe, oh, I should not see your nose. You know,
I was naked noses. That's what we tell my daughter. Naked nose, no naked noses.
I love that. But yes, it definitely became like this little, ooh, should not be seeing that. Yeah. But it was just this amazing turn of events, I would say, because you could go into it and think, oh my gosh, I haven't gotten to this lesson, where last year I was already here and beyond. You know, I was already on the next unit. It didn't matter. You're teaching your content through, you know, maybe you don't get through all the units, of course, that year, but you were still teaching the skills. And more than anything, these kids gained so many other skills that are not in the standards and that can be applied so far beyond the classroom to their real lives and to, you know, the work that they do beyond. And learning loss is definitely one of those like trigger words for me where I'm like, ugh.
Yeah, absolutely. And the research is showing that we have to acknowledge that there is some struggles and there is some students are behind, but the soft skills and the perseverance and what they've gained through all of this also has to be recognized, nurtured, and celebrated.
I love that. That's exactly right. And I think it also, we can turn this to the systemic problems that we were talking about. One of them being these insane standards that we have and standardized testing where we went a year without it. No one died. Like,
right.
You know, like we all survived. The kids kept learning. There was this lack of pressure for that end of year test and the world kept turning. And I think we really need to examine how do we look at student success and growth outside of this box. You know, it's just this insane feeling that everyone learns the same and on the same path. And we know, everyone in education knows that's not the truth. And we have to figure out, I agree, there needs to be some kind of benchmark that we can track and see the growth, but there has to be another solution. And fortunately, I don't have that to like just lay out right here, but that would be something that, you know, down the line, I would love to be a part of reimagining that, because I think we can all agree that's a huge hindrance on kids and teachers, where you think, oh, I have to teach to a test, or if I don't do well on this standardized test, I must be a terrible student. That's awful for any kid to feel, you know, especially if they might have great math skills and then their reading and writing is something that they struggle with. We all have that. And to look at a score and say, oh, I'm in the red. Oh, I must be terrible at it. And it shuts people down. I mean, it's the truth for adults too. So.
And before we get to CT3, one more point. I think the one word that's jumping out, Alexa, is the word empathy. And thinking about this brave new world through a different lens is critical. I'll share a story. We live in Philadelphia, and my 13-year-old came in, and he was sad. And it was February. And he goes, I guess there's not going to be any more snow days. Think about that, right? Because if, you know, when I was growing up, I would be tuning in at 5 in the morning to see if the radio would say that I had a snow day. And it was like the greatest part of school is a snow day, recess, and after school sports for me. And I was like, you know what, Ben? If it's a bad snowstorm, and even if they say we're going to go remote, we're going down to the art museum and we're doing some sledding.
And you did that. You were sending me pictures.
And we did that. And I think that that's important, that we have to have a mindset that this is a crazy world of social media and what they're seeing on TV and how these conversations are having. And we've got to adapt ourselves to this new world. And it sounds very much like you were doing that in your classroom. And then you're going to be doing that in your new position, which we want to hear about.
Talk about it.
Yeah, so CT3 education, CT3 stands for Center for Transformative Teacher Training. And they are all about equity in education and through the lens of anti-racist policies within a classroom and a school, of course. But they do real-time coaching with teachers. And so there's a whole online component of a course that you take for no-nonsense nurturers. And then you have a real-time coach that's in your ear as you're teaching, helping you with, okay, how do you handle a certain discipline issue, or even looking at your lesson? What kind of content are you discussing, and how representative is it of the students in your class or of, you know, our country as a whole? And it's just phenomenal work. The presentations that I've been able to sit in through IEI, you know, CT3's done. They did a workshop with our own team at IEI and looking at our own structure and biases and seeing how we can restructure and look at our own implicit bias. So again, going back to implicit bias, where I'm like, oh my gosh, a year ago I couldn't be talking about it, and now it's being embraced in my workplace. The discussion, at least, you know, of course, we don't embrace implicit bias. It just happens. And how do you react to it? But they did that. And then in Puerto Rico last month, we had CT3 did a presentation to our superintendents. And I have to say, there was this moment where the presenter, he paused and he said, when's the last time you reached out to someone on your team to show appreciation? You know, thank you for something specific, not just thanks for all your hard work. And he actually had them take out their phones or laptops and send an email or a text to someone in that moment. And it was such a powerful, simple thing, but you walked away from that presentation thinking, wow, it's all about creating these moments for celebration. And the whole Puerto Rico conference was about how do we create positive cultures in our schools, especially during this time where burnout is real, you know, at all levels, not just the bus drivers, the teachers, but it's also happening at the principal level and the superintendent level. And if you have these people, these educators leaving, who's going to fill the space, right? And so it's not just about getting new teachers in, it's about retaining the amazing ones that you have. And so CT3 really took their presentation, and it wasn't just centered on the students and what you do in classrooms. It was more for the superintendents, and how do you, you know, if you will, their classroom is the district, right? And how do you create this space where your people feel appreciated and like they're doing the work that you're excited about, but that they're actually making an impact. And it was really amazing to be, just to hear it. You know, I wasn't a part of CT3 yet, but I was sitting there just being like, I need to be there.
I really like the real-time coaching as well. At Penn's Graduate School of Education, we're working with some Alexa-based voice recognition in teaching. And one of the fascinating things that I heard through sort of transformative professional development is this idea of what is the most common coaching or the common mistake that a teacher makes as they're in the presence of teaching. And one of the comments has been probative inflection. So when you ask, what happened in 1776, and the student says the Constitution was signed, the teacher says, no, it should be, tell me why you think it was signed in 1776. Like, this is like, you know, 101 in your world, but probative. So it's tracking what is the voice inflection and how are you responding? Because the inquiry-based teaching versus the declarative-based teaching became connected to developing creative problem solving and critical thinking skills. So it sounds like that's the kind of work that you're doing with CT3 as well.
Yeah. And if you look at their website, they just looking at their core values, everything was in line with myself. And I just thought, I need to be there. I need to be a part of this work. And again, this is the exact work I wanted to be doing when I left the classroom. I just had no idea it was already happening, and there was a place that I could go to do this. So again, IEI was an amazing stepping stone, and it got me, dipped my toe into that world of equity and education with the amazing workshops they were doing and summits and all of that. But I wanted to get back to the teacher level, and we were working with superintendents who are phenomenal, but I feel more connected with, you know, what's going on in the classrooms.
Yeah, I think the moral of the story here is, and we talked about this in a previous show, is that this is a community. John will do anything to help. I'm happy to do anything. I think Alexa is you know, cut from the same cloth. And if there are teachers out there, obviously we want them to stay in the classroom if they want to stay there. But maybe the lesson here is that there are ways to make an impact outside the classroom if it's just not working for you right now. Does that work?
That is completely fair. And there's, you know, never say never, right? There's no, who knows? I might end up in a classroom again one day, and I would feel lucky and honored to be able to do that. But for right now in my journey, this feels like the right path for me. And yeah, so educators.
I'd just like to say, once a teacher, always a teacher. I always will look at you and respond to you as a teacher. That's what you'll be to me, even if you're running CT3 soon. And it sounds like you could.
Well, I am not the person for that. I am happy to be at the table and part of the conversation, or just listening, really. That's what I'm excited to be able to do at this point.
Well, March seems to be a transformative month for you. So I will mark down in my calendar that we need to connect next March and see where you are again. Last March it was leaving the classroom. This March it's CT3. Who knows where you'll be next March? We want to follow your journey. We appreciate you coming on this show and kind of being very raw and honest about your journey. And so truly thank you for being here.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me and letting me be part of this conversation.
Thank you for your service, Alexa. Really.
Thanks, John. Hey, back at you, working at GSC for Penn, right?
Yeah. Thanks.
I have a feeling these two are going to be connecting offline. So we'll get to that. You guys do your thing. Thank you, everybody, for joining us.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening, Breakers.